We would call Glenn Keith.
Good morning, Mr. Keith.
Good morning.
If you could clip that on, and I will remind you that you are still under oath.
Does that work?
Can you hear in the back?
Good morning, Mr. Keith.
Good morning.
Do you have the affidavits that you submitted in connection with the production of the additional alpha analytical data with you?
I will shortly. Yes.
And you have both your May 22nd affidavit and your June 5th affidavit.
Yes.
If I could turn your attention to your May 22nd affidavit.
Okay.
In footnote 1, you make the statement that in late April 2019, Mass DEP learned that Alpha could calculate and report results for an additional 24 VOCs based on the original samples that had been taken in 2018. Is that correct?
Yes, but what we, the 24 was actually 25, just to make that clear.
Thank you.
We did not specify a number in the request, but we, at that time, assumed it was 24.
What led to Mass DEP learning that information in late April 2019?
Well, we had reviewed the data that came in Rhode Island, and there was this publication of the DSMOG blog as well that was asking about additional VOCs, and so we looked into what the differences were between the data sets, and at that point, I spoke with Kathy Kiley eventually and asked her, what did we ask for? Didn't we ask for, TO15? And she confirmed that we had. So then that's why. And then she was able to contact the lab to determine whether the lab could actually calculate the additional results for the additional samples.
And what is Ms. Kiley's position at the department?
She's the contract administrator within the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup. She was related to the contract that we had with Brown Health.
Does she report to you?
No.
And explain for us the collaboration between your office and the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup in requesting the analysis of air samples from Alpha Analytical.
You mean the air samples that we requested on May 2nd?
Just in a broader sense, how do your two departments work together?
Well, there's an existing Waste Site Cleanup, the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup has an existing contract that for various activities that are conducted under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan. And this apparently is one of them. So they have a contract with Alpha Analytical for analytical services.
And you mentioned in your testimony a moment ago that the request initially asked for TO15. What is that?
TO15 is an EPA published method for analyzing volatile organic compounds.
Do you have an understanding of TO 15?
Just a very general understanding.
Do you have the emails that were produced by the department last week in connection with the affidavits?
No, I do not.
If the department doesn't have an extra copy for the witness, I do.
We don't have a copy.
May I provide the witness
May.
with a copy?
Mr. Brady, could you, for the record, so it's clear, specify precisely what you've given the witness?
Yes. Ms. Rothschild, with the department's production of affidavits from Mr. Keith, Dr. Baird, Mr. Cushing, and Glenn Pacheco last week, there were a series of email documents provided via Dropbox link. And other than reading for you the dates and recipients of each email, I don't believe I can any more precisely identify the documents that are in front of the witness.
If you could just identify the date of that email from the department,
Well, this was their disclosure, so.
the one last week.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Keith, if I could turn your attention to the second page of the packet that I've provided to you. Do you recognize this email?
Is that the one that's from Kathy Kiley?
Yes.
Okay.
Just so the record's clear as to which document we're looking at, could you recite for us the date and time of the email and the sender and recipients, please?
Sure. This was sent Thursday, May 2nd, 2019 at 12 p.m. It was from Kathy Kiley to Jim Cialini and Chris Anderson, and CC was myself and Thomas McGraw.
Did you receive this email at the time it was sent?
Yes, I did.
Who is Mr. Ocellini?
He works for Alpha Analytical.
Who is Mr. Anderson?
He works for Alpha Analytical.
Who is Mr. McGrath?
He's former air assessment branch chief. He's retired.
Who succeeded him?
Sean Dunn is the new deputy director for the air assessment branch.
When did Mr. McGrath retire?
The end of January.
Of this year?
Yes.
Would you read the first paragraph of this email, please?
Yes. Hi, Jim. As we discussed last week, it looks like there was a misunderstanding regarding the DEP project 101869 for the air sampling last summer, July through August 2018, whereby Alpha analyzed the samples by TO15 SIM CAM, and we had wanted TO15 SIM EPA method.
Do you understand the language in the paragraph?
Yes.
What does it mean?
Means that when we had requested the initial services of Alpha, we had specified TO15 SIM EPA method. And what they actually did was a TO15 SIM CAM.
What's the difference?
The TO15 SIM CAM has 40 VOCs in the target list, and the TO15 SIM EPA has, I believe, 64 VOCs in the target list.
If I could approach the witness, Mr. Rothschild?
You may.
Mr. Keith, do you recognize this document?
It looks like it's a task order for laboratory systems. I don't know if I've seen this or not before.
Is your name on page 3 at the bottom?
Yes,
And toward the top of the page 3, do you see the section entitled Summary Description of the Scope and Purpose for this request for laboratory services?
yes.
Would you read the last sentence of that?
All samples to be analyzed for VOCs by EPA TO15 SIM.
Is that consistent with the language in the email that we just read?
Yes,
And on the first page of this document, at the top right, states the words initial task order.
yes,
And are you able to read the signature at the bottom of the first page?
Kathy Kiley.
So is this the initial task order for the air samples collected at the Weymouth compressor station site that were sent to Alpha Analytical?
I believe it is.
We would offer this into the record, Mr. Beltran.
Any objection?
No objection.
So allowed.
So turning again to page 3, Mr. Keith.
Yes,
The date of request at the top of that page, just above where it says all samples to be analyzed for VOCs by EPA TO15 SIM. What is the date?
February 26, 2018.
So fair to say as of February 26, 2018, the department had requested all samples to be analyzed by Alpha Analytical for VOCs by EPA TO15 SIM.
Yes,
And fair to say that as of that date, with your name on this document, you understood the distinction between TO15 SIM EPA and TO15 SIM CAM.
no, I did not understand that distinction.
When did you learn of that distinction?
This past April,
How did you learn of that distinction?
I talked with Kathy Kiley.
Describe the conversation for us.
Well, I was asking her, it's a number of calls where I was trying to understand the different methods. And at one point in the conversation, she said, well, there's this CAM, and then there's this BARTA list, and so that's when I realized that they were, that Alpha actually had 2 lists that we could access.
This conversation is in April of 2019,
Yes,
and that's about 14 months after the initial task order was dated, correct?
right.
So what led to your conversation with Kathy Kiley about the scope of the samples to be analyzed by Alpha Analytical 14 months after the initial task order was submitted?
Well, as I stated earlier, in April, we were reviewing Rhode Island data, and then the DSMOG blog came out asking the same question. Why not more VOCs?
Did the DSMOG blog article prompt the department to take a closer look at the data that was provided by Alpha Analytical?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Sure. Did the DSMOG blog article prompt the department to take a closer look at the data that was provided by Alpha Analytical?
Yes,
You would agree that with Kathy Kiley's knowledge, as of February 26, 2018, the department had knowledge of the distinction between TO15 SIM CAM and TO15 SIM EPA.
Objection. I don't know if that question is asked about someone else's knowledge or this witness's knowledge.
Mr. Hayden?
Well, he had a conversation with her about it in April, so I believe this witness has the foundation to answer that question.
And is the question really, Ms. Kiley signed this, I think Mr. Keith's name is on it.
The line of April.
The department, this is a department document, so as of that date in March of 18, the department had knowledge? Is that the question?
As of February 26, 2018, correct?
I think you can answer
Well, yeah, Kathy Kiley had knowledge.
And if you could turn to the 6th page of this exhibit. Ms. Rothschild, do we want to number this in sequence following where we left off May 17th?
that. I think we should. Do you recall where we are?
I have the transcript, so I can quickly reference that.
Should be, it's 29, the last one, and the third day was, there's 28. So it should be 29.
Yes. So,
This would be 29.
correct.
We could mark this as 29, so it'd be...
This document here?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Keith, turning your attention to page 6 of Exhibit 29.
Okay, yes.
Just to make sure we're on the same page, the first line entry is number 1, TO15, dichloro-difluoromethane.
Yes.
Do you have an understanding as to what this list represents?
Well, it says method TO15.
And it includes a list of analytes, correct?
Yes.
So in connection with the initial task order submitted by the department in February 26th of 2018, there is a running list of analytes that were requested for analysis from Alpha Analytical, correct?
I assume, I never saw this, but, I mean, is this all one document that's coming from somewhere? I don't know.
It is. Would you read the analyte requested in line 5 of page 6?
1,3-butadiene.
Now, you would agree that at the time the department received the initial lab results from Alpha Analytical, the department as a whole had knowledge sufficient to recognize whether the list of analytes provided by Alpha Analytical included the entire 64 VOCs included in TO15 SIM EPA.
Objection, I don't think this witness testified the department as a whole had that knowledge.
Overruled. I think that it's been established that Ms. Kiley works for the department. It's a department document. I don't think the question is going to every person in the department, but on basic agency principles.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What was the question?
Could we have a question right back, please?
Now, you would agree that at the time the department received the initial lab results from Alpha Analytical, the department as a whole had knowledge sufficient to recognize whether the list of analytes provided by Alpha Analytical included the entire 64 VOCs included in TO15 SIM EPA.
Well, Kathy Kiley had that knowledge.
Thank you. So turning your attention back to the email that we were looking at, the May 2nd email from Kathy Kiley to Jim Ocellini and Chris Anderson.
Yes.
You would agree that when Ms. Kiley requested the analysis from Alpha Analytical, she requested the TO15 SIM EPA method.
You mean in this email she requested the TO15 SIM?
cross-referencing Exhibit 29.
Yes, yes. So the initial request to Alpha Analytical was for TOSIM, EPA.
So that was for all 64 VOCs.
Correct.
So there wasn't so much a misunderstanding from your vendor as there was a flat-out error.
Well, I don't know what happened between the request and what the Alpha did. So, but Kathy characterizes it as a misunderstanding. I did not have, so whether it's an error or misunderstanding. They didn't do exactly what I think the task force requested.
Correct. So you agree that Ms. Kiley is clear in her request?
It requested EPA TO 15.
This wasn't a circumstance where Ms. Kiley requested TO 15 SIM and forgot to specify EPA versus CAM.
No, I don't believe that she forgot to specify.
So the vendor made a mistake,
Yes.
and the department did not catch that mistake until Desmog-Log's article came out and the department looked further into the issue in April of 2019.
That's when we, discovered, at least I did, that there were different lists.
Would you read the second paragraph of the May 2nd, 2019 email, please?
You indicated that you would be able to calculate the concentrations for the additional analytes that are on the EPA, Alpha EPA TO 15 SIM list that are not on the TO 15 CAM list, with the qualification that if those compounds were not included in the calibration, the concentrations may be estimated.
Do you have an understanding as to which compounds were not included in the calibration?
I believe all of the compounds were included in the calibration.
Did you follow up on that point? How do you know that?
I talked with Chris Anderson and I asked him that question. And he said all of the compounds were calibrated.
When did you talk with Mr. Anderson?
I think it was after we received the new Alpha data that week.
Are we talking Friday, May 10th?
No, it was the following week after that.
Which day?
I don't recall.
When you have conversations with Alpha Analytical representatives, do you take notes?
No,
Why not?
because it was just a quick question with a simple answer. I didn't need to take notes. I just wanted to verify that in fact these were not estimated values we were seeing, but that they were just like that the instrument had calibrated.
If I could turn your attention to the 5th page of this packet of emails that I provided to you.
Oh, okay.
Would you identify the email for us by date, time, sender, and recipients, please?
It's Wednesday, May 1st, 2019, 12:56 p.m. From Gary Moran to Christine Kirby and myself, and CCing Stephanie Cooper.
Who is Mr. Moran?
Mr. Moran is the Deputy Commissioner for Operations at MassDEP.
Who is Ms. Cooper?
Ms. Cooper is Deputy Commissioner for Policy at MassDEP.
Do you recall receiving this email?
Yes.
And did this email follow prior discussions on these subjects?
Yes.
When did the initial discussions occur?
Regarding
The subject of this email?
April.
April 2019?
Yes.
And describe those conversations for us.
I think they had to do with, basically looking at the alpha list and determining that, that we had asked for TO 15 SIM, but the actual list we got was the CAM.
And once that issue was identified, what solution was discussed?
Well, Gary had asked, well, could we still get that data? And so then I went to Kathy Kiley, and she contacted the lab, and they said yes. Got back to her, and I went back to Gary and said, yes, we could get the data. And so, I said, well, let's request the data.
So at that time, you understood that data that was relevant to this proceeding was mistakenly not provided by the vendor, Alpha Analytical, but upon follow-up with that vendor, it was determined that the data could still be obtained.
Objection calls for legal conclusion on relevancy.
Sustained, and your use of the word relevant.
Mr. Keith, as of April 2019, in these conversations that you described between yourself and Mr. Moran and Ms. Cooper and Ms. Kirby, the department determined that data that had been requested in February of 2018 from the vendor Alpha Analytical had not been provided, and based upon follow-up with the vendor, it was determined that that data was still available.
Yes, that they could calculate it and provide it to us.
Once that determination was made that the vendor had additional data that had been requested by the department in February of 2018 was still available to be provided, was there a discussion about providing notice to the parties of this proceeding of that development?
I don't think specifically to the parties, it was just to make it available to everybody, including the parties.
Why wasn't notice provided to the parties at that point that additional data was forthcoming?
Because we did not believe that the data was relevant to the permit or the permit appeal. It had more to do with the HIA process.
How can you make a determination as to the relevance of data without seeing the data first?
Because the data is existing background data. That's not considered in the permit, so it doesn't seem to be, wouldn't be taken into account in the permit.
Why was the data requested at all?
Because we thought if we could get it, it would be good to get it and make it available.
It's more protective of the public interest to have the data, correct?
Yes.
If I could turn your attention within this packet of emails to a May 8th, 2019 email from Kathy Kiley at 4:36 p.m.
May what again?
May 8th, 2019, 4:36 p.m.
Okay.
Would you identify the date, time, and sender and recipients of this email, please?
Sure. Wednesday, May 8th, 2019, at 4:36 p.m. It's an email from Kathy Kiley to myself.
And what does the first paragraph state?
It says, "Hi Glenn, Alpha intends to submit the data to MassDEP by end of day Friday. I will forward it to you as soon as I get it." Kathy.
Do you recall receiving this email at the time it was sent?
Yes.
So this is 1 week before the trial of this proceeding was scheduled to begin on May 15, 2019, correct?
Yes.
So at this point, the department's effort to obtain the additional data had gotten to the point where Kathy reported to you that the vendor Alpha Analytical intended to submit the data to the department by the end of the day Friday, May 10th, 2019.
Yes.
And she told you she would forward it to you as soon as she received it.
Yes.
At that point, understanding that additional data was forthcoming within a week of the trial of this proceeding, was there a discussion about putting the petitioners on notice that additional data would be produced by the department?
No.
Why not?
It wasn't discussed, it did not come up.
8 days later, the information was produced by the department to the parties, correct?
Yes,
What changed?
we had the data in hand to provide to the parties.
You had some of the data in hand to provide to the parties as of Friday, May 10th, correct?
Yes,
So why wasn't that data produced at that time?
we did not have all the reports in yet.
When you had data in hand, why weren't the petitioners to this proceeding notified at that point that the department had additional data in hand that it intended to review and would produce to the parties upon the completion of its review?
Well, first Kathy had it in hand, nobody beyond her did. I did not receive the initial data until Sunday, and then the rest of the data, which is a non-work day, and then Monday, the rest of the data came in. And at that point, there was a decision made to review the data before releasing it.
You agree this was a time-sensitive matter?
Well, I think we wanted to get the data out as soon as possible.
There was a hearing scheduled on May 15th.
Yes.
It was a time-sensitive matter.
Yes, but we did not believe the data was relevant to the hearing, part of the permit.
Again, this is data you hadn't even reviewed.
Not as of Monday.
And in this time-sensitive matter, Ms. Kiley told you on Wednesday, May 8th, that as soon as she received the data, she would forward it to you.
Yes.
And you understand that she received the data on Friday, May 10th.
Yes.
And it's your testimony that she did not forward that data to you as soon as she received it.
I don't know if she was still here when she received it, but no, I did not receive it till Sunday.
If I could turn your attention to an email dated Sunday, May 12, 2019 at 10:56 a.m.
Yes. I think, wait, yes, from Jim.
Correct.
Okay,
Could you identify the date, time, and parties to this email, please?
yes. It was Sunday, May 12th, 2019 at 10:56 a.m. It was from Jim Cellini to Kathy Kiley, CCing Jim Cellini, Chris Anderson, and myself.
Did you recall receiving this email at the time it was sent?
Yes.
What does the first paragraph say?
It says, "Good morning. We did receive the results of the 3 of the Alpha jobs associated with the project attached. Will we get the results for the remaining Alpha jobs on Monday?"
And that was received by Ms. Kiley on what date?
I think it was Friday, so it was May 10th.
And do you see there's an email from Jim Ocellini at the top of this same page?
Yes,
What does that say?
it says, "I'm checking on it. Sorry for the delay."
And you were CC'd on that email, correct?
Yes.
Do you have an understanding as to what the delay was?
No, I don't.
Did you follow up on that issue?
No.
Why not?
Didn't think to. Plus it was Sunday.
Did you follow up on the delay on Monday?
No, because, no. I think there was another email saying it would all come from.
If I could turn your attention to your affidavit dated May 22nd, 2019.
Okay?
Page 4.
Yes.
The section beginning with response 3.
Yes.
Would you read that paragraph for us?
Sure. It is standard practice of Mass DEP to review environmental data before making the data public, to confirm what the data are and what information it contains. This process typically takes several days to several weeks, depending on the amount and complexity of the data. The review of the alpha data was performed as promptly as reasonably possible, given my being in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, May 13th, and Wednesday, May 14th, 2019, and time constraints created by the adjudicatory hearing. It was done on an expedited basis in this case, through the interest of the public and the parties in the data, and was conducted over Tuesday and Wednesday.
What time constraints were created by the adjudicatory hearing?
Well, during the adjudicatory hearing, I, for instance, was here at the hearing, and others who might be involved in this.
So this is an affidavit, correct, that you signed under pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes,
So it's your sworn testimony that the fact that the parties were convened for an adjudicatory hearing in this matter delayed you from being able to produce the additional documents provided by Alpha Analytical to the parties?
well, it didn't delay me, but when we had the okay to release the data, I believe that was in the afternoon of Thursday, and so council and all of us were here, and that delayed us until the end of the day. That's what it was getting at.
So, but for you and your counsel being here at the hearing, the data would have been produced earlier.
I don't know that.
Well, why testify that time constraints created by the adjudicatory hearing delayed production of the information?
Because when we were given the okay, we were in the hearing. So perhaps if we weren't in the hearing, we would have released it, but I'm just saying, I know that's not what happened.
Well, I don't have a preference as to your answer, Mr. Keith. Do you stand by your testimony in the sworn affidavit, or do you wish to retract it?
No, I stand by it.
So your attendance at the adjudicatory hearing delayed production of the Alpha Analytical information to the parties.
By several hours, yes.
And you testified that day, correct?
I don't. This is Thursday?
Correct.
Yes, I think I did.
I can double check for you.
I just don't recall.
I'll let the record reflect that you testified on Friday. So, you were here all day Thursday,
Yes,
didn't testify,
correct.
and was there any discussion about providing the petitioners with notice that additional data was ready for production? Production was being withheld due to your attendance at the adjudicatory hearing.
No,
Why not?
because there was no discussion of that.
Don't you think that would have been a good idea, given the scope of these proceedings?
I think our thinking was that this data was not being released so it could be in the record for this hearing. The department's position was that this is just data we want to make available, but it's not relevant to the permit.
And were you making that determination for the petitioners?
No,
So,
that was just our belief.
in the interest of full disclosure, you agree it would have been more open to disclose the existence of the data once you had it ready for production on Thursday, correct?
I don't know that it would have made a difference.
It would
A
have,
few hours' time.
it would have been more open and transparent, correct?
Sure.
Turning your attention back to page 4 of your May 22nd, 2019 affidavit. In that same paragraph that you just read, beginning with response 3, you describe a standard practice of Mass DEP to review environmental data. What is that standard practice based on?
It's based on practice that usually when we obtain data, we look at it and review it before then making it public to make sure we understand what it says, if we have questions, and to make sure there's no issues with the data.
Is there anything in writing that memorializes that standard practice?
Not that I know of.
And until your conversation with Ms. Kiley, you didn't even understand the difference between TO15 SIM EPA and TO15 SIM CAM, correct?
Right.
So it wasn't your practice to review environmental data, correct?
Well, which data are you talking about?
TO15 SIM EPA data.
Well, no, I mean, I had other staff reviewing the data.
And what about this process and this proceeding with this adjudicatory hearing pending during the time that the department was reviewing documents and deciding when to produce them falls within the department's, quote, standard practice, end quote?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure, could we have it right back, please?
And what about this process in this proceeding? Would this adjudicatory hearing pending during the time that the department was reviewing documents and deciding when to produce them falls within the department's, quote, standard practice, quote?
I would say all of it.
Has this ever happened before?
This particular situation, no.
So you'd agree this is not standard practice?
Well, no, I would agree that reviewing data before making it public is standard practice.
But in the context of reviewing data that was produced by a vendor who did not follow an initial request 15 months earlier and provided data the week before an adjudicatory hearing, and the department undertaking a review of that data and deciding to produce that data after the second day of the adjudicatory hearing before the third day of testimony, none of that is standard practice for the department.
Well, that situation has never happened, but it is standard practice to review data before making it public.
Understood. You would agree that when an adjudicatory hearing is pending and the department receives additional data that intends to produce to the petitioners, it should be standard practice to provide those petitioners with notice that the additional data is forthcoming.
Objection, cause of speculation, and it cause speculation.
Sustained, if you could rephrase.
Mr. Keith, has the manner in which this data was received and produced by the department to the petitioners caused you to reflect on whether the standard practice of the department is appropriate?
No.
Do you stand by the procedure that was followed by the department in producing this information to the petitioners during the pendency of this adjudicatory hearing?
Yes, ideally it would have been good to get it out sooner, but again, the whole intent of releasing it, as I understand, was not entered formally into the record.
All right. We can agree that ideally it would have been good to get the information out sooner, correct?
Yes.
And taking a step back from actually producing the information sooner, can we agree that it would have been better to provide the petitioners with notice that additional data was forthcoming sooner than the evening after the second day of testimony in this adjudicatory proceeding?
Don't know.
If I could turn your attention to the next paragraph of your May 22nd affidavit.
Yes.
Would you read that paragraph for us, beginning with consistent?
Consistent with Mass DEP's practice for any high-profile matter, on the morning of Thursday, May 22nd, 2019, Mr. Moran sent an email notifying the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs regarding the additional information, Mass DEP's initial analysis, and a plan to provide the information to the council involved in the adjudicatory hearing and to post the information publicly.
And if you could cross-reference, sir, on the next page, the date that you signed this affidavit.
Yeah, May 22nd.
So turning back to that paragraph you just read, is the May 22nd date an error?
Yeah, that should have been a different date.
Can you figure out which date it should have been?
I think it was that Thursday. Yeah, Thursday, a week before May 22nd.
So if the hearing was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 15, 16, 17, that's Thursday, May 16th?
Right.
Describe for us the department's practice in high-profile matters for communicating with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
Well, usually, I mean, it can be either an email or a conversation. I'm not personally involved in a lot of those communications, but
I'm asking you because you described it in your affidavit. So what's your familiarity with that process?
sending a heads-up email or having a phone conversation
For what purpose?
to let them know that what data is being made available and a brief summary of it.
And why? Why the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs?
Well, so that they know in case they get questions, I think is one reason. So that they're in the loop on the data and whatever the issue is.
And this proceeding fits into the department's understanding of a high-profile matter?
Yes. Well, the whole, yes.
If I could turn your attention back to page 2 of your May 22nd affidavit. In the section entitled Response 2,
Yep. Yes.
would you read that paragraph for us?
The persons who received the data directly from Alpha are Ms. Kiley, myself, and Mr. Pikul, as described in response number 1. Below is a description of further persons within SDEP who were informed that the data had been received.
So that's 3 people at the department that received the additional data from Alpha Analytical, correct?
Directly, yes.
And would you read the next paragraph for us?
On Monday, May 13th, 2019 at 10:10 a.m., I emailed the 3 Alpha reports I had received to Sean Dunn, Deputy Director of the Air Assessment Branch. At 12 p.m., Mr. Dunn sent instructions to Mr. Pikul about accessing spreadsheets of the data from Alpha's online customer portal.
So that's a 4th department personnel, Mr. Dunn, who received the Alpha Analytical data, correct?
Right, but not directly from Alpha.
Understood. What are the spreadsheets of the data from Alpha's online customer portal?
It's all the data elements in a spreadsheet format.
Were you aware that Alpha had an online customer portal the department could access?
Yes.
When did you first become aware of that?
Well, during when we received the first set of Alpha reports, we accessed the Excel spreadsheets.
When was that?
Probably in August 2018.
If you could read the next paragraph in your affidavit, the first bullet point on page 3.
On Monday, May 13th, 2019, at approximately 10:15 a.m., I attended a meeting with Jenny Outman, Darrell Fallon, Lauren, Karen, Glenn Pacheco, and Sandra Baird, and told them that the Alpha reports were being received.
So with the individuals identified, that's persons 5, 6, 7, and 8 at the department who then had knowledge of the Alpha analytical data, correct?
Yes, although I don't know that Sandra Baird was actually there. I don't. She may not have been.
You signed an affidavit saying she was, correct?
Yes.
And are you retracting her name from your affidavit?
No, I just don't know. She was on the invite, but I just don't recall if she was actually at the meeting.
It's a meeting you attended, correct?
Yes.
Less than a month ago?
Yes.
Do you have any notes from that meeting?
No,
Why not?
because I didn't take any notes.
You based your listing of Dr. Baird in this paragraph of your affidavit based on an email invitation?
Yes, I believe I did.
Did you confirm with anyone Dr. Baird's attendance or non-attendance before signing your affidavit under the pains and penalties of perjury?
No.
Would you read the next bolded paragraph of your affidavit, please?
On Monday, May 13th, 2019, in the early afternoon, I spoke with Stephen Coughlin, meteorologist in the air planning branch, and Tom Higgins, chief of the communications branch within the Bureau of Air and Waste, about the Alpha reports.
So this is person 9 and 10 at the department who had knowledge of the Alpha analytical data, correct?
Yes.
And what did that conversation with Mr. Coughlin consist of?
I asked Mr. Coughlin to review the reports compared to the initial Alpha reports
For what purpose?
to see what differences there were,
And why was that relevant to you?
and also to summarize the new Alpha reports,
Why was that important to you?
because we wanted to identify what new data was in the new Alpha reports.
Would you read the next bulleted paragraph, please?
On Monday, May 13th, 2019, at 3:52 p.m., I left a voicemail for Deputy Commissioner Gary Moran that the Alpha reports were being received and that final reports were expected by the end of the day. At 5:19 p.m., Mr. Moran sent an email regarding the reports that included Michael Dingle and Assistant Commissioner Christine Kirby.
So these are persons 11, 12, and 13 of the department that had knowledge of the Alpha analytical data, correct?
Yes,
And that's as of Monday, May 13th?
yes.
Would you read the next bulleted paragraph, please?
On the morning of Tuesday, May 14th, 2019, Mr. Moran informed General Counsel Benjamin Erickson, Commissioner Martin Suberg, and Deputy Commissioner Stephanie Cooper by phone that the data had been received.
It's persons 14, 15, and 16 of the department who had knowledge of the Alpha analytical data, correct?
Yes.
Would you read the next bulleted paragraph?
On Tuesday, May 14th, at 3:33 p.m., Mr. Kaufman sent an email regarding the reports and copied Mark Work, Chief of the Air Planning Branch.
That's person 17 at the department who had knowledge of the Alpha analytical data?
Yes.
And that's as of Tuesday, May 14, 2019, correct?
Yes.
Having placed 17 department employees on notice of the data produced by Alpha Analytical on Friday, May 10th, and Monday, May 13th, was there any discussion within the department about sharing the receipt of that new data with the petitioners?
Not that I know.
Would you read the next bulleted paragraph, please?
On Thursday, May 16th, 2019, at approximately 12:30 p.m., Thomas Cushing attended a meeting with Mr. Moran, Mr. Pacheco, and myself, and learned that the Alpha reports had been received.
Mr. Cushing is person 18 at the department who had knowledge of the Alpha Analytical data?
Yes.
Describe that meeting for us Thursday at 12:30 p.m.
Yeah, it was a meeting about, Mr. Moran had asked about how do we determine what is modeled in air plan approvals. And so we explained, we model what's emitted from the, what's emitted by this proposed facility.
Your paragraph also describes discussion of the alpha reports that have been received.
Yes, that's when apparently that topic came up in Thomas Cushing. That was the first time. Oh, sorry. Right, so that's when, is that working? Back. Thank you.
Is that better?
Can you hear me? Can you repeat the question?
Your paragraph also describes discussion of the alpha reports that have been received.
Yes. Okay.
So you participated in this meeting, correct?
Yes.
And this is during the adjudicatory hearing,
It was at the lunch break.
and we had testimony in the morning and testimony after the lunch break in the afternoon, correct?
Yes.
And you testified earlier that because of your presence at the adjudicatory hearing on Thursday, May 16, 2019, the additional data produced by Alpha Analytical was not provided to the petitioners until later that evening.
Well, it's not only my participation, but counsel. I mean, it's not my role to provide documents to other counsel.
But in part because you were at the hearing.
In part.
Now, during the lunch break on Thursday, May 16th, you attended a meeting with Mr. Moran, Mr. Pacheco, and Mr. Cushing, and you
Yes.
discussed the alpha reports that had been received.
Yes, just, again, Mr. Moran had asked, I think it was, the genesis of his question was the alpha reports. He was asking, you know, would we model everything on the report? And we clarified no, because we only model what is actually emitted from the proposed facility. So he was trying to think in his own he was trying to understand how what was modeled for the proposed facility relates to any information for which we had monitored.
Okay. As of this meeting on Thursday, May 16 at 12:30 p.m., 8 days earlier, Kathy Kiley had told you that Alpha Analytical intended to produce the additional information by Friday, May 10th, correct?
Yes,
And you didn't receive any part of the Alpha Analytical data until Sunday, May 12th.
yes,
And then you received the balance of the Alpha Analytical data on Monday, May 13th.
yes,
And then you had a meeting with Jenny Outman, McDara Fallon, Lauren Karam, Glenn Pacheco, and possibly Sandra Baird on Monday, May 13th to discuss this data.
yes,
And then you spoke with Stephen Coughlin, meteorologist, on May 13, 2019, and asked him to compare the differences between Alpha Analytical's original data set and the newly produced data set.
yes,
And you had all of that background during the May 16, 2019 meeting at 12:30 p.m.
yes.
So what did you discuss with Mr. Cushing, Mr. Moran, and Mr. Pacheco about the Alpha reports themselves?
I don't think we really discussed the results per se. It was just to answer a question that Gary had raised.
Did you discuss the fact that you were walking back into an adjudicatory hearing where the petitioners did not know that this information existed yet?
No.
Why not?
because we didn't talk about that.
Why didn't we talk about it?
It didn't come up.
Would you read the next bullet paragraph, please, at the bottom of page 3 of your affidavit?
On Thursday, May 16th, 2019, at 5:04 PM, I sent an email to Kelly Ingram, Mass DEP Internet Services, and Anthony Abraze, Mass DEP Internet Services, with a link to the Alpha reports.
Those are persons 19 and 20 at the department who had knowledge of the Alpha Analytical reports,
Yes,
and 20 people at the department had knowledge of the Alpha Analytical reports before the information was produced to the petitioners in this proceeding.
yes.
What went into preparing a link to the Alpha reports that you were able to send in an email to Ms. Ingram and Mr. Abraze?
Well, we took the 7 PDF reports, provided them to Tom Higgins, and he put them into one PDF report. And then he posted them on the department's website with a link. And I think he sent that to me, and I sent it to Kelly and Anthony and said, right, for posting, or actually, they were posting it. Tom had sent an internal link, and I sent it to them to make it live.
And later on, the first page of that production was removed, correct?
Yeah, it was posted in error.
What document was posted in error?
Don't even recall what it was. It was some table.
So all you were doing for the public was posting Alpha Analytical data, correct?
Yes,
It was not the department's review of that Alpha Analytical data, correct?
that's correct.
And there were no additional documents intended to be provided to the public other than Alpha Analytical's data, correct?
Well, eventually, there was intended to be additional documents, or a summary.
Right, but as of the evening of Thursday, May 16, 2019, when this information was first produced to the petitioners, there was no intention to provide any documents to the general public other than documents provided by Alpha Analytical, correct?
Well, not on that evening.
Correct. That's all I'm talking about.
Okay, yes, correct.
So how did this additional page get attached to documents that were only intended to be from Alpha Analytical?
Because they were in the same file folder, and Tom just grabbed it.
Okay. If I could turn your attention to the last page of your affidavit, it's page number 5.
Yeah.
Under the heading entitled 4, would you read response 4 for us, please?
No, Mass DEP did not disclose the existence of the data to the applicant prior to the time it made disclosures to the other parties. All parties were informed about the data at the same time.
We just spent some time identifying the 20 employees at the department who received the Alpha Analytical data before the petitioners did, correct?
Yes.
Did you confirm with each of those 20 department employees that they did not inform the applicant about the data?
Personally, no.
When you signed this affidavit attesting that not you, but the department did not disclose the existence of the data to the applicant prior to the time it made disclosures to the other parties, what was the foundation for your testimony if you did not personally confirm that with each of the 20 department employees?
Because we trust our employees, and we confirmed with council that no, none of us had sent it out.
You confirmed with counsel that none of the 20 employees who had knowledge?
None of us involved in the proceeding, and there would be no reason to think that any other employee would send it out.
So fair to say you don't know for sure, it's just an assumption that you're making?
Well, it's an assumption with good foundation that I know our employees, and most of them wouldn't even have known what to do with the data.
Right, and I'm not asking about an employee that accidentally came across the data. I'm asking about the 20 individuals identified by name in your affidavit who received the data before the petitioners in this case. You swore under oath that no Mass DEP did not disclose the existence of the data to the applicant prior to the time it made disclosures to the other parties.
Right.
If we follow your affidavit, 20 people had the ability to do that within the department. And I'm asking you what you did to confirm that your testimony was accurate before you signed this affidavit.
I did not confirm with any of those 20 people, but again, I trust our employees, and I am confident that this is a true statement.
If I could turn your attention to your other affidavit dated June 5th, 2019.
Yes.
Would you read the last full paragraph for us, beginning with the earliest date?
Yeah, the earliest date on which I first knew of Mass DEP's request to Alpha Analytical for the additional data was on Thursday, May 2nd, 2019, when I was copied on the email request that was sent to Alpha Analytical from Kathy Kiley. However, during the week of April 22nd, 2019, I was involved in discussions regarding the possibility of requesting and receiving the additional data.
If you could turn back to that email we looked at earlier from Gary Moran to yourself and Ms. Kirby dated May 1st of 2019.
Yes.
We discussed earlier that this email followed earlier conversations that you had with Mr. Moran about these issues, correct?
Yes.
And that was during the last week of April 2019?
Yes.
And you testified earlier that you told Mr. Moran that Alpha Analytical had the additional data and that could be provided to the department.
That they could calculate additional data.
So these are conversations that you had during the last week of April 2019 and that Mr. Moran followed up with you on Wednesday, May 1st, 2019 at 12:56 p.m., correct?
Yes.
And at that point, you had enough information to confirm to Mr. Moran not only that the department requested additional data from Alpha Analytical, but that Alpha Analytical had the data and was able to produce the additional data, correct?
Objection, I don't know if that was his testimony. I think there might be confusion in the timeline in that question.
Can you read back the question,
Sure.
please?
And at that point, you had enough information to confirm to Mr. Moran not only that the department requested additional data from Alpha Analytical, but that Alpha Analytical had the data and was able to produce the additional data, correct?
Can you answer that, Mr. Keith?
This is as of May 1st.
Yes.
So, I mean, as of May 1st, we had the knowledge that Alpha could calculate, or I did, and I think that's what Gary is asking, could they do it? And so as of May 1st, I had that knowledge.
And that's consistent with how I heard your testimony earlier this morning.
Agreed, so the objection is overruled.
So, as of May 1st, in order for the department to have determined that Alpha Analytical had the capability of producing the additional data, the question had to first be asked of Alpha Analytical, correct?
Yes,
And that was a question asked by Ms. Kirby during the end of April 2019.
Ms. Kiley.
Ms. Kylie, thank you. So turning back to your affidavit dated June 5th, that first sentence is not accurate as far as the date is concerned, is it?
The earliest date on which I first knew of Mass DEP's request to Alpha Analytical for me was, no, that's accurate, because that's the date that Kathy actually asked for the data. Prior to that, she had discussed the possibility of whether the data was available, but no request had been made of Alpha to produce the data.
So you're distinguishing the accuracy of your affidavit on the fact that although Ms. Kiley had asked Alpha Analytical if it was possible to obtain the data, and Alpha Analytical answered her and said that yes, it was possible, and you had a conversation with Mr. Moran as of May 1st, 2019, that the data was available and the department could request it. It wasn't until the following day, on May 2nd, 2019, that Ms. Kiley submitted a formal written request to Alpha Analytical to obtain that data.
Objection, I didn't really hear a question, and it seems rather compound if it is a question.
Sustained. Can you rephrase, please?
Sure. You've already agreed, Mr. Keith, that as of May 1st, 2019, you told Mr. Moran that the additional data was available from Alpha Analytical.
Well, there's a response to this email. If it's dated May 1st, then that's, yes.
So we agree on that.
Well, again, I would have to see my response to Gary. If it's dated May 1st, then yes, I'd agree to that, which I think it is.
And in order to respond to Mr. Moran, we've already agreed that Ms. Kiley had to at first ask the question of Alpha Analytical as to whether that data is available.
Yes,
And she had to receive an answer from Alpha Analytical that that data is available.
yes.
But your affidavit says that you first knew of Mass DEP's request to Alpha Analytical for the additional data was on Thursday, May 2nd, 2019.
Right, because we had not requested the data from Alpha until that day.
So what had Ms. Kiley done in connection with her inquiries with Alpha Analytical prior to May 2nd, 2019?
She had asked if it was possible for them to still go back and calculate concentrations for the data.
So the distinction in your affidavit is that prior to May 2nd, 2019, Ms. Kiley asked if it was possible, and only as of May 2nd, 2019 did she request in writing that that additional data be provided.
Or request in any form that the data be provided, yes.
If I could provide the witness with documentation, Madam Chairman?
Thank you.
Mr. Keith, do you recognize this document?
Yes,
What do you recognize it to be?
an email.
Could you identify the date, time, sender, and recipient, please?
It's August 9th, 2018 at 9:50 a.m. from Tom Graff to myself.
Do you recall receiving this email?
Yes.
And department wants to raise an objection as to any additional other identification of this email, the content to it. My understanding is we're here today to talk about when did the department first know about the additional alpha data, when we first asked for it, that process, and a discussion of the new alpha data. Just based on the date and the content, by a very quick perusal of this email, this looks like it has to do with HIA issues.
I'm gonna allow it. I think that when, at the end of the hearing on the 17th, and when we were discussing the scope of this hearing, it was based on information that I had at that time. I'm going to allow the petitioners a little leeway, given what's been filed to date, the subsequent affidavits and all the emails that have been produced. I'm going to give them a little leeway on exploring. I agree, the health impact assessment is not the subject of this appeal. I want to see where Mr. Hayden is going with this. I haven't read this in depth yet, but I'm going to allow him to ask.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Keith, would you read the first paragraph of the email, please?
Sure. Glenn, see answers to questions below. Attached is the first quarter of Roxbury and Lynn data. In these cases, it doesn't look like benzene at either site gets below 0.1 parts per billion by volume, even if toluene is very low. In the ambient air, there should be a ratio where toluene is much higher than benzene and xylenes, which has been observed so far at Fort River. Rhode Island does claim lower MDLs than alpha. I do have a plan to cross-compare, which I will discuss with you tomorrow.
The sentence that states Rhode Island does claim lower MDLs than alpha. What is MDLs in that sentence?
Method detection limits.
What is that? What is the significance of that?
A method detection limit is a statistically derived value where they take, like, it's I don't know the exact, it's statistically derived. It's kind of like the very, there's a definition for it, but I can't recite it.
And the next sentence that states, I do have a plan to cross-compare, which I will discuss with you tomorrow. Did you have that conversation with Mr. McGrath?
I believe so.
And what was the cross-comparison described in that
I think
sentence?
he was just comparing data to the Rhode Island data.
So this is the Rhode Island Department of Public Health data?
Yeah, because they routinely monitor, analyze our VOC data for Roxbury and Lynn, and earlier in the email it says attached is the first quarter of Roxbury and Lynn data.
And I just want to be clear, because the email is not necessarily this specific, but the conversation that you had with Mr. McGrath in August of 2018 was about comparing the air sampling data from the Rhode Island Board of Public Health with the air sampling data obtained from Alpha Analytics.
It could be relative to, we were also running a semi-continuous monitor, and that it's comparison to that.
And I'm focused specifically on Rhode Island claims lower MDLs than Alpha. I do have a plan to cross-compare.
Yeah, so I think he did look at that as well.
So that's the air sampling data from the Rhode Island Board of Public Health compared to the air sampling data from Alpha Analytics.
Right.
And you discussed that with him following this email.
I believe so.
And did you take any notes of that conversation?
No,
Why not?
because it was just a conversation, neat conversation, and I believe we met in the field and I wouldn't have carried a notebook.
Did you have any subsequent conversation with Mr. McGrath about cross-comparing air sampling data from the Rhode Island Board of Public Health with air sampling data from Alpha Analytics?
I think he had, there was, I don't know that we had verbal conversations, but there may have been emails related to it.
And given that this was part of the ongoing process in connection with the air quality plan approval review, why was the Rhode Island data not produced to the applicants until the DeSmog blog article identified it?
Objection, I don't know if this witness testified this process had to do with the air permit issue here. I think we need clarification on that.
Sustained. He did not testify that this was part of the permit review.
Mr. Keith, what was your purpose in speaking with Mr. McGrath?
Well, this had to do with just the air monitoring that we were doing for the HIA.
And that air monitoring for the HIA was ultimately reviewed and relied upon by the department in issuing its air quality plan approval, correct?
Objection, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I just feel I need to renew my prior objection that this is going back to the HIA, and which I guess it's fine, but I thought the purpose of this hearing was to talk about the new Alpha data.
And as to that question, I'm going to overrule the objection because the question related to the department's reliance on the HIA when it issued the permit, which the permit says we considered. But to the extent that you're questioning, Mr. Hayden, is getting into the substance, the design of the HIA, that's outside the scope of not only today's hearing, but the proceeding in general. So if you could keep your questions narrow with regard to the Alpha data. I understand the Rhode Island data came in earlier as part of this proceeding, but remember the scope.
Thank you. Could we have a question right there, please?
And that air monitoring for the HIA was ultimately reviewed and arrived upon by the department in issuing its air quality plan approval, initially reviewed and relied upon by the department in issuing its air quality plan approval, correct?
And my objection was that that was not his testimony. It was not related to the air quality plan approval, that part of the question. So I would just ask the question to be rephrased, unless the witness can testify.
The question was carefully worded in order to establish that the department relied upon the results of the health impact assessment in issuing the air quality plan approval. So,
Would it be helpful to read that question back one more time?
please.
If you could please do that.
And that air monitoring for the HIA was ultimately reviewed and relied upon by the department in issuing its air quality plan approval, correct?
The objection's overruled. You can answer.
Okay. The department, I would say no. The department reviewed the data, but did not rely on the data in issuing the plan approval. Because the permit does not rely or consider background data.
If I may approach
You may.
the witness. Mr. Keith, before I ask you questions about this document that I've placed in front of you, I just wanted to make sure I followed your last answer. Your testimony is that the department did review the Rhode Island data and the cross comparison of that Rhode Island data with the Alpha analytical data in connection with its issuance of the air quality plan approval.
No. It's
You said you did not rely on it, I followed that. But I believe you also testified a moment ago that the department did review it.
Well, reviewed the data in the HIA. There was data in the HIA showing data from the monitoring we did, and there were comparisons to data from Boston and Lynn that was in the HIA. So that's what was in the HIA reviewed by the department. So if that's what you're asking, I just want to be clear.
It's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
Because the HIA did not include the Rhode Island data, correct?
It included some Rhode Island data as background and comparisons, yes, it did.
The Rhode Island data that was discussed in your rebuttal testimony, I believe, which we can pull up, but you remember the timing of the department received it the day after Christmas? You didn't receive it until after New Year's.
Right.
And you
That's-
didn't look at it until the day that the health impact assessment was issued, that day.
That data was not in the HIA, but I'm just referring to the email that you were questioning me about, where he says attached is the first quarter Roxbury and Lynn data from Rhode Island. And that, I don't know if that specifically, but there was data from the Rhode Island laboratory with VOC analysis for Roxbury and Lynn that was part of the HIA as a comparison to Weymouth.
And that data you reviewed in connection with issuing the air quality plan approval?
Any data that was presented in the health impact assessment, including any Rhode Island data, which was really for comparison, was part of the HIA, so that was reviewed by the department.
And did the department review any Rhode Island data that was not provided to the HIA in connection with issuing its air quality plan approval?
No,
Why not?
because it wouldn't have been in existence at that time.
Well, there was a little bit of a lag, right? The air quality plan approval was issued sometime after the health impact assessment.
Yes.
And you had the additional Rhode Island data in hand the day that the day that the health impact assessment was issued.
Right, yes, and as I testified, I think I was asked this question, I did not provide it to Tom because it's not relevant to the department. It's not considered in the department plan approval.
Right? When you received that data, did you review it?
No, I did not. I relied on Tom McGrath's review.
The document that I placed in front of you, do you recognize it?
Yeah, it looks like an early version of the HIA, or a possible ideas for the HIA. Mock-up of possible images for the HIA.
Understood. What is the genesis of this document?
It was just to start putting together down on paper what graphs or images we might want to include in the health impact assessment.
Who prepared it?
Objection, again, and I do apologize, I don't mean to interrupt, but we are 100% in HIA land tonight.
The objection is sustained. Mr. Hayden, this document clearly pertains only to the HIA, which, as has been clear from the beginning of this proceeding, is not subject to review of this proceeding. I understand from the recent pleadings of the petitioners that there are issues that they take with the HIA and requests made with regard to the HIA, but the scope of these appeals does not include those issues.
I understand, Mr. Rothschild, the ruling on this subject. I was intending to create a foundation for this document before asking a single and specific question as to how the information in this document relates to the additional data that was produced by Alpha Analytical, subject of today's proceeding. So understanding the ruling on the objection may not change, may I draw this tribunal's attention to that paragraph in this document so that I can at least present the question on the subject for an additional ruling.
Well, Mr. Fallon, I'm going to allow him to go down that road. We'll see what the question is, renew the objection if it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Keith, just for foundational purposes, how is this document generated?
I mean, how-
Who prepared it?
I believe Sandra Baird prepared the initial version, but it was a group effort.
Including you?
I don't think I probably commented on it, but I don't think I did any actual initial preparation.
Fair enough. If I could turn your attention to page 6. Do you recall your earlier testimony that explaining the difference between TO15 SIM CAM and TO15 SIM EPA?
Yes.
And would you remind us the difference between those two requests as it pertains to the number of VOC analytes?
The EPA, TO15 EPA's SIM is a 60-something analytes, and the TO15 SIM MCP CAM is 40.
So if I could turn your attention to the paragraph underneath section 2A on page 6.
Yes.
Would you read that first sentence for us, please?
Yes, Mass DEP will assess baseline air quality conditions by collecting monitoring data for 40 volatile organic compounds, including benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylene, and formaldehyde in the study area, and comparing the results to statewide levels in Mass DEP ambient air guidance.
So that sentence within this document identifies the TO15 SIM CAM number, correct?
Well, yes, someone counted the number of VOCs in the alpha reports we have. Total 40.
So based upon that counting, the department had knowledge as of this point that the information provided by Alpha Analytical did not include the entire 60-something list of VOCs provided in a TO15 SIM EPA report, correct?
Well,
Objection. Again, this relates to the HIA, not to the air plan approval. Also, this witness has testified he's not overly familiar with this draft document that may have changed. We don't know what the final document says. And that's an alternative ground for objections to any questioning on this. But it still is related to the HIA, not to, this witness has already testified the genesis of how we found out about the difference in the analytical methods, the genesis of the inquiries into Alpha, and the steps taken by the department to get the new data and produce the data. This is going back in history on a draft document that this witness did not draft and has not testified to having overly broad familiarity with, and I would object to any further questions on this document.
Mr. Hayden?
The intended line of inquiry is as narrowly focused as possible because of the importance of the distinction between the department's request for a TO15 SIM CAM review by Alpha Analytical, which carries with it analysis of 40 VOCs, versus a TO15 SIM EPA request from Alpha Analytical, which carries with it a review of 64 VOCs. This document, although it is generated in the context of the health impact assessment, contains information that suggests that Mass DEP was aware that it was collecting monitoring data for only 40 volatile organic compounds, which suggests that the department was aware it had only requested the TO15 SIM CAM data from Alpha Analytical. So it's both a factual line of inquiry as well as impeachment evidence pertaining to the department's position in this witness's testimony.
Well, and I understand that, but I'm not sure that Mr. Keith, who testified, who doesn't recall whether he was involved with this, is the right witness for this line of inquiry, because I think anyone sitting here could see this and answer that same question, other than Mr. Keith, including you. So I'm sustaining the objection.
Mr. Keith, I believe you testified just a few minutes ago that you were involved in reviewing this document?
Yes.
And in reviewing this document, did you participate in the information that was presented in this paragraph regarding the department's assessment of baseline air quality conditions by collecting monitoring data for 40 volatile organic compounds.
Objection, just for clarification, my objection was, I realize multi-part, but I objected to any further questions on this draft document to this witness. And I just need clarification. That part of my objection was sustained.
I think the point Mr. Hayden is trying to make, if I understand this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, is as far back as August 2018, the department was aware that there were only 40 VOCs on the list. And as of 3 weeks ago, the department had knowledge of 64 VOCs on the list. And Mr. Keith has been involved in this process. And I think what Mr. Hayden is trying to do is draw a line between having had knowledge 9 months ago and statements that the department only had knowledge of this distinction and the 24 missing VOCs or not calculated and analyzed VOCs until after the petitioners filed their pre-file and disclosed the Rhode Island data and the Smog Block article came out. And so to the extent that there's information that impeaches a witness's testimony about when the department knew, I think that I'm going to let him go there. Because that's the reason we're here, is because there is data that were not disclosed in a timely fashion. So, Mr. Hayden, you can continue down, keeping in mind this document. I'm not going to admit this document into evidence. This pertains to the HIA, and the HIA is not being reviewed in this proceeding.
Understood. And thank you. Mr. Keith, if I could draw your attention to that same paragraph that we looked at. Given your participation in reviewing this document that's dated August 27, 2018, do you agree that as of August 27, 2018, the department stated its intention to assess baseline air quality conditions by collecting monitoring data for 40 volatile organic compounds, VOC, including benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylene, and formaldehyde, in the study area and comparing the results to statewide levels and Mass DEP ambient air guidelines?
Yes, and just to clarify, we received the initial ALPA reports. Eventually we realized there were 40, and someone counted it. But you'll note in the footnote 1, it's still referred to as EPA method TO15. There was not an understanding that even though they were doing FCP CAM 15, I think the understanding was, well, that was what the contract was. So there was not an understanding between what we'd asked for and what we had received, just to clarify that.
So we do agree that as of August 27, 2018, the department was aware that the alpha analytical data included only 40 volatile organic compounds.
Yes.
And we established earlier that Kathy Kiley at the department had knowledge sufficient to understand the distinction between TO15 SIM CAM and TO15 SIM EPA.
Yes, but she was not reviewing this data as it came
Whether she was or was not, someone at the department had that knowledge.
in. She did.
And that was as of August 27, 2018 as well. If I could just have a brief moment, Ms. Rumsfeld?
You may.
as well?
Can you hear the witnesses?
No, in the back, I could not hear you.
You can't hear me.
Yes.
So can you hear Mr. Keith?
Yes.
Can you hear Mr. Hayden?
Yes.
Okay, I will speak up.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Rothschild, I have no further questions for this witness other than the email that we had reviewed dated August 9 of 2018 between Mr. McGrath and Mr. Keith. I don't believe I offered that into evidence. Nope. Did you get that? Okay. We would like to offer the email dated August 9, 2018 between Mr. McGrath and Mr. Keith into evidence as the next exhibit.
The same objection as when I first read this email. It really has to do with the HIA, not with the alpha data or the department's reaction and response to getting the data.
I agree. I think that this is clearly HIA related and not appropriate to be part of the record of this.
Thank you.
Mr. Bertram, Mr. Goldrosen, Mr. Miyares, Ms. Stock.
Okay, it is on. Good morning, Mr. Keith.
Good morning.
As you may recall, I'm in the RS Special Counsel of the Town of Weymouth. I'd like to begin in your testimony this morning. You made a reference to having received the okay to release the data.
Yes.
Who gave you that okay?
I believe it was Gary, or Mr. Moran.
Okay, and what can you tell us about the decision process that resulted in that okay? What standard was applied?
Well, you know, on Tuesday and Wednesday of that week, there was review going on of the data and a quick summary of what it showed. And on Thursday, my affidavit, an email was sent to the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs regarding the data. And then subsequent to that, there was an email from Gary saying, I don't know what it's in the packet, saying by the date.
So was the decision made by Mr. Moran, or was it made by somebody in the Executive Office?
I don't know, I was not involved in discussion to executive office.
Okay, if you could return now to your affidavit of May 22nd. In particular, to response 3.
Yes, sir.
In the first sentence there, you said it was the standard practice of Mass DEP to review environmental data before making the data public, to confirm that the data are or to confirm what the data are and what information it contains. You see that?
Yes.
So when you receive the data from Alpha in the first place, who conducted that review?
Steve Coughlin was on Mr. Coughlin. I asked him to do a comparison of the updated reports with the other ones to figure out what was new and what was not new.
Okay, I'm asking though about when you received the data from Alpha in the first place.
Can you clarify in the first place?
Well, I believe you testified that you received the data from Alpha in roughly just before Christmas, is that correct?
No.
Okay, when did you receive it?
We received the data from Alpha on, well, the first set of initial data came on May 10th, 2019. We received 3 reports.
No, I'm not referring to the report you received in May. I'm talking about the original report on the 40 chemicals.
Oh, those were received back in July and August of 2018.
Okay, and who conducted the review that you indicated is your standard practice?
There was a combination of people, Thomas McGrath, Steve Coughlin, I think was involved, Mark Wirt. They prepared summary tables of that data
Okay,
and reviewed it.
and at that time, did they confirm what the data are?
Yes.
And did they confirm what information that the data contain?
Yes.
So at that time, when they made that confirmation, was it apparent to all that the data collected were for the 40 original chemicals?
No, because they prepared summary tables of VOCs that were detected. And so those summary tables were, I don't know how many they were, but they would have been a subset of the 40. And those were put into PowerPoint presentations presented to the advisory committee throughout the process.
Okay, so I'm trying to find out who confirmed that the data were complete at the time that they received it last summer.
Well, I think when we received, confirmed that it was complete. We received the data. We got lab reports from Alpha. So Tom McGrath reviewed those.
And did he specifically review them to determine whether they were complete?
I don't know, but he certainly did not raise any questions about the number of VOCs in them.
Okay, so the review was done. The request had been made for the full EPA list. The review was done. It did not contain the full EPA list. And your testimony is that he conducted a review but did not inform anybody that the data were incomplete. Is that correct?
I don't think there was an understanding on his part or anyone's part that we could have received anything else, because this was a pre-existing contract the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup had with Alpha Analytical and through the MCP, Massachusetts Contingency Plan. And so when we got the data, I certainly did review the data in detail or count VOCs. I don't know if Tom did or whether he assumed this is, but eventually, someone counted it, but it never raised an issue that this was incomplete, and, 40 was still a robust set of data, and it covered most of the contaminants that were, concerned at the time. So, again, I don't think Tom had the understanding that what we received was different than what we had requested.
So, earlier today, you were asking questions about a May 2nd email from Kathy Kiley, on which you were copied,
Yes,
in which she characterized this as a misunderstanding.
yes.
So would I be correct in saying that when the review was done, that there appears to have been a misunderstanding on the part of the department as to how many chemicals they did in fact ordered, reviewed?
I think her email is regarding a misunderstanding on the part of Alpha Analytical. My understanding is, they generally are tasked by the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup to do this MCP CAN method, so when she sent the task order, that's what they assumed they were being asked to do.
But the misunderstanding appears to have been on the part of the department as well, is that correct?
I don't know how to characterize it. There was certainly not an understanding that we had not received what we had asked for. I think that detail was not apparent. And there may have been an assumption that this is what we get via this contract.
So what steps specifically were taken to look at the data to determine whether it was complete?
Tom McGrath reviewed the data,
Yes. And what did he do?
and he concluded that this is the data we have. And he worked with other staff to prepare summary tables.
And he determined that the data were complete?
He certainly didn't raise any issues of incompleteness with me.
So is it your testimony that he looked at the data and reviewed it for completeness, and since he did not raise any objection, therefore he must have determined that they were complete?
Objection, I didn't object before, but there's an awful lot of questions about someone else's thoughts and determinations on this witness.
Sustained.
Okay, well then let's ask you what you did to determine that the data were complete.
I didn't do anything. I relied on Tom and other staff to review the data and prepare summary tables, which then we presented to the public. And so I did not get into the details in these reports. I relied on Tom's expertise.
So when you asked him to conduct that review, did you give him any instructions?
No, I relied on him too, because I'm not familiar with, I had never reviewed lab reports really. That's not my background.
And what is the reporting relationship between you and him?
He reported directly to me.
So is it your testimony that you asked him to review this but gave him no instructions as to what to look for?
That's right, I relied on his expertise because I don't have expertise in reviewing monitoring.
Okay, so in your affidavit, when you refer to the standard practice of the department, that standard practice written down anywhere?
No, it's just what the department does.
And is it standard practice when you receive data to review it to make sure that it is complete and that it contains everything that has been requested?
I think in general, yes.
So can we draw the inference, therefore, that because it was standard practice that that was done in this case?
I believe that Tom believed the data was complete.
Okay, earlier this morning, you, I believe, attempted to make a distinction between having considered the HIA during the plan approval and relying on it. Could you clarify the distinction between those two things?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of an HIA is to provide information relative to a proposed decision and recommendations to provide any benefits, to amplify public health benefits, to mitigate non-benefits. So it's not a decision-making document on a project. It assumes if something were to be built, what are the potential impacts and what are recommended actions. So clarification is the department reviewed that data and certainly considered some of the recommendations, but the department did not rely on the monitoring data specifically in the plan approval, because the monitoring data was not part of the air dispersion modeling and is not considered in air dispersion modeling in the plan approval process.
So when the department requested the air sampling data to be taken, is it your testimony that request was not made in connection with the air plan approval process?
Yes, correct. It was made in connection with the health impact assessment. The governor issued a letter in directing the department and the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Public Health to conduct a health impact assessment. And in that letter, it specifically said, as part of the scope of the HIA, was to establish existing background levels of air in the Fall River area. So that's why the monitoring was done. It was not done as part of the plan approval process.
So are you saying that the HIA was not necessary to provide information to the department so it could approve, condition, or deny the application?
Yes, I mean, we issue plan approvals all the time without considering monitoring. We don't require monitoring as part of the plan approval process. This was obviously a separate process above and beyond what would be done as part of the plan approval process. It was to inform the department in response to the governor's directive.
So I'm going to show you a document. It's called a joint motion for an order setting permit schedule. Have you ever seen that before?
No.
I haven't seen this document yet, but now I have. I have an objection to this document being considered by this witness or entered into the record. It's not clear. This is some foundation that I can see what the United States Court of Appeals or District of Columbia Circuit has to do with the alpha data, the department ordering of the alpha data, how it came about, the process it went through, and why it took the number of days it took us to get it. I have an objection to this document. It's not aware.
Mr. Mioris, where are you going with this?
Well, I'm going to ask him about one sentence that is located in paragraph 9 on page 6. The last sentence in paragraph 9 says, the department contends that it is necessary to obtain the results of this assessment, that's referring to the HIA, before it can approve, condition, or deny Algonquin's air permit application. This is a motion signed by counsel, by Assistant Attorney General, on behalf of the department, a representation that was made to the D.C. Circuit court, and it directly contradicts the testimony that he's just given, so that's why I'm asking.
Mr. Fallon, I'm going to allow this in, or he's going to ask this question for this purpose,
For that limited
for
purpose.
that limited purpose. And I think that this is something that we've certainly discussed in the context of this appeal and the schedule from the very beginning, back on February 15th at the pre-hearing conference. And I'm going to be raising this again today. So, Mr. Mieres, you have a very short road.
And thank you for that.
Welcome.
So, Mr. Keith, in this filing, a representation was made to the DC Circuit Court that is necessary to obtain the results of the HIA before it can approve, condition, or deny Algonquin's air permit application. You see that?
Yes.
But your testimony here is to the contrary, is that correct?
No, this, I agree with this. The governor ordered, well, I don't know, the governor issued a letter telling Mass DEP not to issue an air plan approval until a health impact assessment was done. So this fits right in line with that. The department contends that it is necessary by the governor's order to obtain the results of this assessment before it can approve, deny, or condition on the air permit application.
So is it your testimony that the governor's order was merely procedural, that the department needed to have this information, but it was not appropriate for the department to rely on it in making its decision?
No, I think, again, an HIA is designed to provide information to a decision maker to consider. What I'm saying is the air monitoring data that we've been discussing, the department did not rely on that in issuing the plan approval. But
I don't understand your answer. Is this information necessary or is it not necessary?
If no health impact assessment had been conducted, then it would not be necessary. It's not a matter of course that we do air monitoring for plan approvals. The only reason it was done in this case is because the governor directed the DPH to do a health impact assessment and not to issue a permit until that was completed and considered. The department did consider that, in fact, adopted some of the recommendations from the HIA into the final plan approval.
So is it your testimony that the department could have denied the air plan approval based on the information contained in the HIA?
I don't know. That was a situation, I can't speculate on that.
So in what way were the results of the HIA necessary to your decision process?
Well, again, first, the governor said we needed to look at the HIA, then to see what it said, and consider any recommendations from that HIA.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay, if I could call your attention to the exhibit that was previously marked as number 12. On the third page of that exhibit, which is conveniently numbered page 1 at the bottom.
Yes.
Previously, your attention was called to the block called Summary Description of the Scope and Purpose for this Request for Laboratory Services. which is near the top of that page. You see that block?
Yes,
And the last sentence in that block says, all samples to be analyzed for VOCs by EPA TO15 SIM. You see that?
yes.
Who made the decision to use the EPA TO15 SIM?
I think it was Tom's recommendation that, I mean, that was, we were building off of some earlier citizen sampling they did TO15, so we decided, well, we'll do TO15, and that is the standard method for analyzing VOC. So it was kind of a matter of course, and that's what we do as similar method in our other VOC monitoring.
Okay. When you say that it's the standard method, DEP actually has another method, though, right? The TO15 CAM.
Well, under the waste site cleanup contract, there is something called the TO15 SIM CAM.
Okay. Tell us what that is.
Well, it's the contract that with Alpha for analyzing VOCs, but in that case, the target is just 40 VOCs.
Okay. And when you say that under the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup contract with Alpha, this is a contract with a different bureau within DEP, is that correct?
Right, so, the Bureau of Air and Waste does not have a contract, so we learned that there was a contract in place under waste site cleanup, and we were able to use that.
So what was the reason for including the larger number of animals?
Well, again, from my role, I didn't understand that what even TO15 was, other than it's a method and it has a list. But again, I don't know that there was thought given, at least on my, Tom may have understood, but it's kind of, it's just a standard list. But I guess each laboratory can decide which VOC targets they analyze for.
So there are two standard lists, correct? The CAM list and the EPA list.
Well, apparently under the MCP contract, but there are many, each lab has their own list. And they may have more than one list, I don't know. I mean, EPA TO15 is kind of it's not prescriptive in terms of what you have to analyze. Each lab decides that.
So when the request was originally made to Alpha, who was responsible for coordinating the work between your bureau and Alpha?
Well, it was Tom, I was involved, I had to sign, and Kathy Tyler.
And is it your testimony that nobody explained the difference between these two lists to you at that time?
That's correct. I did not know that there were two lists.
turn that off if you'd like. Just there's a button with a standard on-off. Pick it up.
Is it on? All that time we tried to mute it, we were unsuccessful. Okay, we have no further questions for this witness.
Mr. Goldrosen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Keith again, I'm John Goldrosen for the town of Braintree. You testified that, and I believe there was an email on this, that on May 8th, Ms. Kiley informed you that she had heard from Alpha that the data would be available, made available to DEP on Friday, May 10th. Is that correct?
Yes.
But when Alpha sent the first 3 batches of data late on Friday, was that email sent only to Ms. Kiley?
Yes.
You were not CC'd
I was.
on that. And the first you knew of that data having arrived was on Sunday?
Sunday. Yes.
And how did you know that 3 batches had arrived?
I checked my email.
And what email informed you that there were 3 batches?
The email that's in the documents, the one that's dated Sunday, that one.
That Ms. Kiley sent to Alpha?
Yeah, so she sent an email to Alpha and added me, I think.
Right. Yes, okay, we have that one. So when you had not heard on Friday that data had arrived as you had previously been informed it would arrive, did you contact Ms. Kiley or make any effort to determine why it had, to your knowledge, had not arrived on Friday?
No, I did not. I assumed that it just had not arrived.
Okay. You also testified, and we have an email to this effect, Ms. Kiley informed or asked Alpha on May 2nd for to do the revised data.
Yes.
Okay. And that was, as you testified, after going back to the last week in April was when there were discussions within the department about asking for that data, correct?
Yes.
So who actually, well, before the May 2nd email, who informed Ms. Kiley that she should go ahead and ask Alpha for the email, for the revised data?
I did.
And was that, and when did you ask her to do
I
that?
believe it was that same day.
All right. So that was May 2nd. Now, there are emails that were discussed between you and Gary Moran on May 1st.
Right.
And the first email, there's an email from Gary Moran to you, as well as to Christine Kirby and CC Stephanie Cooper, saying, have you had a chance to discuss the monitoring issue with OGC? Yeah, you want to look at that one? This is May 1st, 12:56 p.m.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So this is the email from Gary Moran dated Wednesday, May 1st, 12:56 p.m.
Yes.
And he asks, have you had a chance to discuss the monitoring issue with OGC and check on the availability of the data? We should schedule a follow-up discussion tomorrow or Friday, correct?
Yes.
Was that, he doesn't say, although there are, both you and Christine Kirby are in the to line, did you understand this email to be directed to you in terms of the questions that you were
Yes.
asking?
Yes.
Right. And had you had previous discussions, this suggests that you had had previous discussions with Gary Moran about these issues, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you just describe what those discussions had been previously?
Well, I do recall that the last week of April, I had discussions with him about, the whole issue with the data, and relayed to him that I had learned, from Kathy, that, yeah, we actually had asked for EPA SIM, which is on their list, but we received
All right. And OGC is the Office of the General Counsel?
yes.
All right. So, without asking you to reveal anything of discussions with attorneys within DEP, why did Mr. Moran think that you should have a discussion with DEP attorneys about the monitoring issue?
I mean, I don't know other than to stay coordinated.
All right. And you, as you said, there's a follow-up email then
Yes and
at
yes.
109 where you say yes and yes to it in response to the two questions. So you did have a discussion.
Yes.
All right. You stated in response to my earlier question that you were the one who directed Ms. Kiley to go ahead and contact Alpha.
Yes.
Who at DEP actually decided, who was in position of authority to decide that this should be done?
Gary.
So he directed you or to direct Ms. Kiley to do this?
Yeah, that happened the next day.
And was that, did you have a meeting with him the next day? Is that what, and that's where that decision
Yes.
was made?
Yes.
And that's all that I have.
Does the department wish any redirect?
Thank you. No, we don't have any.
I just had one follow-up on his testimony.
I'll allow that.
Thank you. Mr. Keith, in response to Mr. Miaris' questioning, you described a standard method for the air quality sampling in the Bureau of Air and Waste as opposed to the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup?
Well, I think what I was saying is we do VOC monitoring in Lynn and Boston. We actually send those canisters to Rhode Island, and they use a type of TO15. That's it's a modified version, but it is essentially, I understand, the same. It's EPA TO15, but again, different target lists, slightly different procedures. So that's what I was referring to.
So why in this instance, if the Bureau of Air and Waste had that relationship with the Rhode Island laboratory, why did the Bureau of Air and Waste rely upon an existing contract that Alpha Analytical had with the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup that contained a different test?
Well, we chose to contract because we could get the results faster, and we did not want to impose on Rhode Island in any kind of quick turnaround sample, because they report to us on a quarterly basis.
And you ended up sending air samples to Rhode Island anyway, correct?
There's a kind of QC checklist.
So the imposition was made on Rhode Island Laboratory in the end.
But not in terms of timing, and the volume of that additional data was not as intense as what was done with Alpha. 9 versus 42 samples.
And did anyone in the Bureau of Air and Waste confirm with the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup that the specifications of the existing contract with Alpha Analytical matched the needs of the Bureau of Air and Waste in requesting this air sampling data?
Well, I think there was an assumption that, we were asking for EPA TO15 SIM, and that was sufficient.
So, in answering my question, the check that was done was, an assumption was made.
Well, right, because it says EPA TO15 SIM, so that means, at least, I assume in Tom's mind that meant, 60-something target analytes.
And why did the Bureau of Air and Waste not enter into a separate contract with Alpha Analytical?
Because there was a pre-existing contract that we could access immediately versus having to go out to bid and create a whole new contract committee.
So,
It's something we could access.
So the Bureau of Air and Waste utilized an existing contract with the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup for speed. Is that fair?
Yeah. And convenience.
And that's what ended up resulting in the incomplete production of data, correct?
Well, choosing them, that is the end result. It was that misunderstanding.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Keith, you're done.
Okay, thank you.